All right, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this village board meeting to order on Tuesday, February 20, 2024. We've got some special guests with us this evening to lead us in the presentation of the colors and the Pledge of Allegiance. And so we've got the Girl Scout Troop 47375 from Juliet Low Elementary School. And with us this evening to introduce the girls is their leader, Laura Mantell. Laura?
Hi, everyone. We have part of our troop here today. We have Grace, Maya, McKenna, Vicky, Narai, and Molly.
Okay, girls, if you take it away.
Color guard, attention. Audience, please rise. Color guard, forward march. Scout salute. Those not in uniform, please place your right hand over your heart. Color guard, halt. Color guard, cross the colors. Color guard, post the flag of the United States of America. Color guard, post the flag of the village of Arlington Heights. Color guard, honor your colors. Please recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Color guard, return to ranks. Color guard, about face. Color guard, forward march. Color guard, halt. Color guard, at ease. Audience, please be seated.
Let's give them a round of applause. Well, ladies, thank you very much for joining us tonight. You did a great job. And again, you can watch it on TV, not tonight, but it'll be replayed for the next couple of weeks. And so thank you again for joining us. And go home and do your homework. All right, would the clerk please call the roll?
Trustee Dunnington?
Here.
Trustee Schwingbeck? Trustee Bertucci?
Here.
Trustee Tinaglia?
Here.
Trustee Grasse?
Here.
Trustee LaBedz?
Here.
Trustee Shirley? Trustee Baldino? President Hayes?
Here. First item on the agenda is the approval of minutes, and we have two sets to approve tonight. The first is from the Committee of the Whole meeting from February 5th, 2024. Any changes or passes? Is there a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve the Committee of the Whole meeting minutes from February 5th, 2024.
Second.
Motion by Trustee Grasse, seconded by Trustee LaBedz. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Next, the minutes from the same evening Village Board meeting, February 5th, 2024. Any changes or passes? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion by Trustee Tinaglia, seconded by Trustee Grasse. Any questions or comments from the board or the audience? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Next, we move on to the approval of the accounts payable, and I call on Trustee Bertucci.
I'll move approval of the warrant register for the check date February 15th, 2024 in the amount of $2,360,881.31. Second.
Motion by Trustee Bertucci, seconded by Trustee Tinaglia. Questions or comments from the board or from the audience? Seeing none, roll call.
Trustee Bertucci?
Yes.
Trustee Tinaglia?
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz?
Yes.
Trustee Grasse?
Yes.
Trustee Dunnington?
Yes.
President Hayes?
Yes. There are no recognitions or presentations tonight, so we'll move on to citizens to be heard. And we do have one blue card tonight from Keith Moons. Keith?
Thank you. Keith Moons, Arlington Heights. President Hayes, I would just please be reminded that the reason I think most folks, including my family, chose to move and stay in Arlington Heights was not because of the Metropolis Theater that we approved $70,000 for tonight, or because of al fresco, but the reason is because of the high quality public education that we have here. There's no question that it's the top in the state, if not in the country, our public schools. In fact, you're a proud product of our public school system. You are. You're a shining type of leader came out of the public school system. So it's disappointing to hear of, and then read in the Daily Herald an article that was entitled, "Trying to Make It Happen on Christmas Eve." By the way, it was a very well-researched article and well-written, that village staff and some board members are actively involved in pressuring the school districts, it appears, to bend toward the Bears' lowball property estimate through a memorandum of understanding, which is the latest gimmick around here these days. In my opinion, the school districts are standing up for us taxpayers. That's my opinion. If they need $160 million as an assessed value to cover the development of Bearstown, Illinois out there, then the village staff and the village board should fully support them, and that amount, 100%. Why would we ever diminish our high quality of public education to subsidize the billionaires' Bears' profits here? So President Hayes, could you please pass along a comment to the Bears chairman from an Arlington Heights taxpayer and his family, which would be mine. Please tell the chairman that we welcome the Bears to relocate in Arlington Heights, fully welcome them to come out here, but they have to pay their own load. They have to pull their load just like everybody else that moves out here. That may be difficult for them to understand. That means, though, that they have to pay their fair share of real estate taxes, just like everybody else does, to support our high-quality public schools. And I think that $160 million assessment seems to be pretty reasonable, given that they paid $197.2 million less than a year ago. But if the Bears are planning to not pull their own load, then I think we're all better off for them to just stay in the city where they can constantly lose there just as easy as they can constantly lose out here, rather than come out here. I think we would all gain if they don't want to pull what is their fair share. If the Bears do not relocate here, I think there'll be one party to blame, and that will be the Bears. It's not going to be the schools. It's not going to be the school. It's not going to be the village board or village staff or the taxpayers. So if you could please pass that comment on to the chairman, I would appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, President
Thank
Hayes.
you, Mr. Moons. Let me just say, I agree with you that the quality of the education here in Arlington Heights is a primary, if not the primary reason why people move to Arlington Heights in this region. I just got telling these Girl Scouts that were here with us this evening that very thing about the property taxes. About 65% of the property taxes goes to the schools, and that's why the quality of education is so high here in Arlington Heights, because our property taxpayers are willing to pay for it. So I agree with you 100% on that, that the quality of education here is second to none. And so we don't want to do anything to diminish that. In fact, we do all we can to encourage that. And just the other thing I'd like to say is there's no pressure being exerted by me or this village board on the school districts to come to an agreement with the Bears. We're doing all we can to encourage both sides to continue to talk, to come to a reasonable solution that's amenable to both sides. And so that's what we have been doing, and that's what we will continue to do. There's certainly no pressure being exerted on anybody. So thank you for your comments. Any other blue cards? Becky?
No.
Anybody else in the audience want to address the board on items not on the agenda? All right, seeing none, we'll move on then to old business, and we do have one item to discuss this evening. That's from our report of the committee of the whole meeting on February 12, 2024, a discussion of the updated noise ordinance. Mr. Recklaus.
Would you, this item is going to appear later on the agenda too. I can talk about it now or talk about it then, whatever the board would prefer.
Well, let's talk about it now, and then we can move it up in the ordinance up in the agenda.
Okay. Well, as you mentioned at the February 12th Committee of the Whole, Chief Pecora presented a proposed new ordinance that would better regulate our noise-related issues within the community. At that meeting, the COW discussed the issue and recommended approval to the village board. Tonight, I'm planning on just providing a brief review of the ordinance for the audience here tonight and those watching from home. And staff is recommending approval of the ordinance. As we discussed, this came up over dissatisfaction by many with our existing noise regulations. We adopted the state of Illinois pollution control regulations many years ago, and we found that in practice, those standards are very difficult to enforce. That to enforce them properly, a strict adherence would require the purchase of expensive equipment or the hiring consultants and having them always being at the right time in the right place in order to collect information to be admissible in court. The reality is noise enforcement, as we discussed, is inherently subjective. One noise of a given volume would be considered a nuisance by all, while another noise of the same volume could not be bothersome to almost anyone. So the duration, location, time of day of a noise also make a big difference on how they're perceived. We have traditionally, our police departments use a broad reasonableness test for noise issues, but this has proven to be subjective. It can put our officers in a difficult position as no two individuals have the same definition of reasonable. So staff set out to work with the village attorney to develop a new ordinance that provides some objective standards, but also allows some officer discretion. I'm just going to kind of quickly go through some of these slides. Not all of them. As you can see, the village received over 1,200 calls for service and neighbor calls over the last 2 years for noise-related complaints. Almost 2/3 of the complaints come between 10 p.m. to 6 p.m. is what we're seeing typically. Staff tried to really codify the factors that have been traditionally used by police officers when determining reasonableness of a complaint. These are some of the things that we look at and that are kind of contained in this ordinance. Some of the per se violations, things that would be violations as defined in this ordinance, are emergency signaling devices, radios, televisions when they're plainly audible from 75 feet, loudspeakers and amplifiers, from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. on weekdays and 10 p.m. to 10 a.m. on weekends and holidays. Yelling and shouting from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. This is something that would come into play in our downtown area as folks are exiting bars and so forth. Domestic animal and bird noises. Loading and unloading, we're regulating slightly differently in the alfresco zone than we are in other areas due to the limitations of opening up that area and the kind of the time crunch that we've observed in terms of trying to get all the garbage and deliveries done in a certain period, given the closure of the streets. Again, this is just reflecting of the current practice. Construction and repairs, reflecting our current practice. Blowers and similar devices. This was a topic of discussion that's being referred to the Environmental Commission as discussed at that meeting. Commercial establishments have to be mindful of the noise they make between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. when they're near residential property, and then any general noise that leaves property between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. in residential districts. It should be noted that there's still going to be broad nuisance standards that are going to be applied outside of the specific standards. A lot of emphasis on residential districts in this ordinance. The downtown is not considered a residential area, as it is by definition a mixed-use area. However, many of the new standards will still apply to the downtown, just not some of the specific ones. There are some exceptions. Obviously, things like emergency repairs and construction, outdoor school and playgrounds, outdoor events that are approved by the village, events sponsored by the village or park district, outdoor church activities, commercial establishments that have outdoor dining permits are regulated by those permits that would override these rules. Athletic events and places of worship are the way that we would be prosecuting these. Obviously, the preferred route always is to gain compliance and not have to prosecute, where we would notify people that they're in violation and hope that they come into compliance. Minor infractions they'd be giving warning tickets. First violations In a 12-month period, would be getting fines of $25 to $40 with no hearing appearance required. And second violations would be, in a 12-month period, would be subject to a $500, $750 to $750 fine. If a violation was serious enough, it could be escalated higher than the compliance or warning tickets. That'll depend on the circumstances and be up to police officers' discretion. So we're happy to answer questions, but when the time is appropriate, we're recommending approval of an ordinance amending chapters 8 and 19 of the municipal code regarding noise regulations as presented.
Randy, can you just go over the changes that have been made since we discussed this a couple weeks ago?
Absolutely. Very minor changes. There was a reference to chapter 8 that we did not put in there. That was number 1. Instead of referring to electrical storms, we're calling it, power outages, because that's really more to the point in terms of debris removal. There's a couple of code references that were changed. We made a point to differentiate between domesticated animals and just wild animals. We are referring specifically to the collection of solid waste instead of including that as just part of loading and unloading. We are talking about reasonable activities on public playgrounds or public and private school grounds, rather than just saying outdoor school and playground activities. We are adding a provision for the testing of emergency generators for less than 20 minutes between 10 a.m. and 7 p.m. for allowable noise. One of the things that we wanted to clear up, we realized we had to address some of the in our solid waste section of our code. We had to make changes there to mirror this and to reflect the Arlington Alfresco collection hours. And I believe that was generally it.
Okay. Questions from the board? Trustee Grasse.
Thank you. Mr. Reckless, if I may go back to some of the changes, I was just curious why we removed health from the third paragraph.
From the third paragraph in, let's see,
Health-
health and safety, morals and welfare. If you want to comment on that,
I'm trying to find where that is, Trustee
right
Grasse.
here.
Third paragraph from the top.
Oh. Those are, because this is more maybe legal semantics, Trustee Grasse. These are just in the recitals, as I know the board knows. When we updated the ordinance and moved the provisions into chapter 8 of the village code instead of 19, we left the reference to health in 19 since that's what chapter 19 is about. And we
Okay.
focus on language that's in chapter 8 now, which refers to public safety and morals. I think, that the phrase public health, safety, and welfare is often used as a unified sentence. I don't know that it makes much legal difference to have it structured this way. We can change the recitals if it's the board's pleasure.
But it's still covered in chapter 19.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, other questions from the board? Trustee LaBedz.
Thank you. Manager Eckhouse, the range of fines, is that discretionary to the police officer, or is it like this particular thing gets a $25 and this particular thing gets a $40, or how's?
It's generally discretionary to the police officer. If someone was doing something, egregious, they could make an assessment that they could go with, a higher fine. But for the most part, our intention is to follow this type of process. Yeah, the hearing officer would be the one assessing the fine.
Okay.
But in terms of what we'd be pursuing, that's what we'd be recommending.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. Well, this is a response to a lot of concerns that we've heard from residents and businesses over the years, that we don't have something that will allow us to address noise complaints. And so this gives us a tool, gives our police officers a tool to address some of those concerns that we've heard over years. And so I think it's a good thing that we're doing, and we appreciate all the hard work that the staff has done on this. And so I would certainly be in favor of approval of the ordinance as currently written. Any other questions or comments from the board? Anything from the audience? Can we have a motion to move this legal item up to this point in the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
By trustee Bertucci, second by trustee LaBedz. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Now, if it's the board's will, we could entertain a motion to approve the ordinance.
I'll move to approve the ordinance amending chapters 8 and 19 of the municipal code regarding noise regulations as presented.
Second.
Motion by trustee Grasse, seconded by trustee LaBedz. Any further questions or comments from the board? Anything from the audience? Go ahead and trustee
I just had a
Grasse.
comment. I am grateful we're putting this in place just to really help our police department be able to enforce some of the concerns that we hear from our residents. So I'm glad to see that we're doing this.
Okay, roll call.
Trustee Grasse,
Yes.
trustee LaBedz,
Yes.
trustee Bertucci,
Yes.
trustee Tinaglia,
Yes.
trustee Dunnington,
Yes.
President Hayes.
Yes. Again, thanks Hart and all the people involved in drafting this. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And now we will move on then to the consent agenda, there being no other old business. Any members of the board wish to remove an item on the consent agenda? Any members of the audience wish to remove an item on the consent agenda? Seeing none, are there any members of the board who wish to vote no or pass on any item on the consent agenda? If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve.
Move approval?
Second.
Motion to approve the consent agenda by trustee Tinaglia, seconded by trustee Dunnington. Roll call.
Trustee Tinaglia,
Yes.
trustee Dunnington,
Yes.
trustee Grasse,
Yes.
trustee Bertucci,
Yes.
trustee LaBedz,
Yes.
President Hayes.
Yes. We have no new business, and we've already taken care of the legal item, and so we'll move on to the report of the village manager. Anything other than the request for closed session?
Nope.
Anything from the board under petitions and communication? Seeing none, we will then go back to village manager for his request.
The staff would respectfully request that we enter into closed session for 5 ILCS 120/2C21, discussion of minutes, whether lawfully closed whether for the purpose of approval of minutes or the semi-annual review of the minutes, and 5 ILCS 120/2C11, litigation when an action against, affecting, or on behalf of the village has been filed and is pending before a court or administrative tribunal, or when the board finds that an action is probable or imminent.
Do we have such a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by trustee Tinaglia, seconded by trustee LaBedz. Roll call.
Trustee Tinaglia,
Yes.
trustee LaBedz,
Yes.
trustee Bertucci,
Yes.
trustee Dunnington,
Yes.
trustee Grasse,
Yes.
President Hayes.
Yes. So we are adjourned into closed session and will not be reporting back out. Thank you for joining us this evening.